What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we are quickly evolving into a major news network because 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time in just about 29 minutes, there is supposed to be a Harford County press conference related to Rachel Morin, the story that we all talked about last night. And the sheriff there, Jeff Gahler, is supposed to deliver some remarks reportedly about a possible suspect. We do not know if that person is in custody or not. But Sheriff Gahler did say previously that this was an intentional taking of a person's life. So the obvious question that we were asking last night is, why would anyone do this? Who would do it? Best guest here. And I'm just going to have you guys all mute if you don't mind, and then unmute when we go. So when we have all these people on, we've got a little audio tech issue. So if you guys can mute yourselves, I'd appreciate that. Best guest here. We've got Agent Scott Duffey. You know him because it's a show so good. It happens every week. Great Scott. It's your true crime fill, as Anjanette just bounced out for a moment. Scott is a retired FBI special agent out of the Delaware office, focusing on gangs, bank robberies, and fugitive task force cases for 20 years. Prior to that, he was a police officer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This happened on the Maryland-PA border. You've got Detective Phil Ramos. If I read his whole bio, we'll be here for 3 weeks. He's a retired senior homicide detective, 35 years of service. Last 15 years were in homicide. He went undercover for 12 years, told us last time he had guns pointed at his head, infiltrated the Cuban mob. The guy has done it all. 3-time Officer of the Year award, a native Las Vegan, and a guy who enjoys riding his Harley. Then you've got Josh Ritter, named Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year by the Association of Deputy District Attorneys. He is now part of the Eldabe Ritter trial lawyers firm, and he hosts True Crime Daily, The Sidebar, an amazing podcast. Check it out. Last but certainly not least, Anjanette Levy, a correspondent and host for the Law and Crime Network. She's covered all sorts of high-profile cases, Stephen Avery, Kyle Rittenhouse, Derek Chauvin, and she spoke to Sheriff Gahler this past week. Anjanette, to you first. How did that go? And just don't forget to unmute yourselves. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Joel. Sheriff Gahler, he's been in this business, the law enforcement business, for a very long time. Very nice guy. They're holding everything really close to the vest, as they always do in investigations such as this one. This is something that is incredibly rare in their community. They don't have a lot of homicides. He really couldn't remember the last time they'd had a homicide. And a lot of people use this trail, this Ma and Pa trail. So this was a pretty shocking thing to have happened in their community. He talked a lot about, the need to protect the investigation. I think he said he had 10 detectives working on this, which is a huge number of people for a department of that size. And I had asked him specifically about surveillance video the one time I interviewed him. And, they were looking for that type of thing. They were canvassing the neighborhood, of course, and the area surrounding the trail to see if they could find out anything at all. And they're holding back her cause of death because they don't want, I'm assuming they think that these are details only the killer would know. So I'll be very interested to see what comes of this. I specifically asked them if they had an arrest or had made an arrest in this case. And they said potential suspect information. That's all they would say as far as this news conference goes at 7:30.
And you see why we have the best guest, Anjanette Levy, a seasoned journalist asking tough questions of the sheriff. And we've got Detective Phil Ramos. For those who have not followed this case, Rachel Morin is a 37-year-old mother of 5. She has those 5 children with 3 different fathers. So complicates the investigation because obviously they all have to be looked into. She went to this trail called the Ma and Pa Trail on the border of Maryland and PA around 6:30 Saturday. She disappears. She's found the next afternoon in what is described as a criminal homicide. She's a petite woman which is sort of important because she could be overtaken potentially. Only 5'2" and 107 pounds. Detective Ramos, pull back the proverbial curtain. I mean, you've had more high-profile cases than probably anyone that we know of, maybe with the exception of Detective Phil Waters, and I'm sure it's comparable. Very high-profile case. What is going on behind the scenes right now as they prep for this news conference? And do you think they're going to announce a suspect?
It all depends, Joel, on what they've come up with. When you start these classic whodunits, the first place you go is to your victim, and you establish your victimology and start finding out absolutely everything you can about the victim. What were their habits? What was their lifestyle like? Were they active on the internet? Were they there? They'll be checking her computer for what she might have been searching for, any contacts she had, and stuff like that. And then speaking to close friends and family, just to find out as much as you can about her, about the victim. Once you get started on that, then you just start beating the bushes and see what happened, if you can, around where her body was located. Forensics is going to play a huge part in this. Once they collect all the evidence they can, then they just start talking to as many people as they can. And then, let's not forget, we live in a day and age where you can't go anywhere without being tracked by somebody. So her cell phone is going to be very important, as are all the cell phones that were in the area at the time that she entered that area. That's going to be another place to start, and that's going to be a volume of information that the detectives are going to have to digest and try and make heads or tails out of.
And Scott Duffey, you're another seasoned investigator. We don't know much about anything because authorities have been really tight-lipped, which you guys, meaning you and Detective Ramos, generally believe is a good thing. Do you have any hunch? I know you're not inside this investigation, but do you think they name a suspect today, or is your feeling that they might be asking the public for help here? And Detective Ramos, I'm going to have you mute once again, if you don't mind. I apologize. I'll do it for you. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what this press conference has, and the fact of delaying it. There's probably some things that they needed to put together, or something maybe that didn't take place in the timing they thought, so thereby they need to delay it, because they're not just going to put a name out there if the guys or whoever it is that's out on the loose and they're trying to track, especially if it's a known person, known to her being. If they have good surveillance video and they're looking for what looks to be a complete stranger, then sure, they're going to put some info and looking for the assistance of the public and saying, hey, if anybody can identify, and that's very typical. They have some good camera or witness descriptions, and so thereby put some sort of sketch or still out there and say, we're looking for this person as another potential, witness, somebody to talk to. It'd be interesting to see too what the house has been like, that, and the house not only where she was residing, but who was residing with her, and see if there's been any police activity. I haven't, through what I've been seeing, I haven't seen anything of like active search warrants being conducted in relatively known locations. So it's it'd be interesting to see if they actually name somebody, and if they do, my guess is this person's in custody.
And Scott, before I switch over to Josh Ritter, Raul Thomas, bright legal and criminal mind. So did Cass come up with something interesting data on the case? Can you just explain to the audience what CAST is, how the FBI uses it, and how it might have factored in here?
Yeah, so CAST stands for Cellular Analysis Surveillance Team. This is an expert team that of highly trained FBI agents and support personnel who are specializing in tracking cell phone and not only cell phone data, but anything related. For example, a Google search, and Siri search, whatever. Anytime that the phone is pinging against a tower, experts can really put together a nice package of where the person is down. I mean, they've really gotten it down to a science where you can really close in a relatively close location, as opposed to when the all first started. You could put somebody a block away, a quarter mile away, or whatever. It's really come a long way. And with genealogy on the forefront of investigation today, CAST is right up there with modern technology for solving cases.
And look at this. I love Scott Duffey from Sally Vella. He doesn't get to talk as much and wait so patiently, but he's spot on. I just asked the guy 2 questions in a row. Guy's taking all the talking. What are you talking about, Sally? I usually get that with you and Phil, but not today. Josh Ritter, to you. By the way, there were 325 tips that came in as of Monday, and as Anjanette pointed out, 10 investigators on this case for a sheriff who does not recall a homicide in the county, which is a crazy number when you think of it that way. A very safe area normally. But Josh Ritter, we had the great Chief Anderson, who's a former detective sergeant with the Birmingham PD. Now he's at a university, so he's a chief. And there was this reporting that 5 witnesses, the sheriff was looking for 5 witnesses, and they found these 5 people, and they interviewed them. And I asked Chief Anderson, how important are these interviews? And he said it's amazingly important, because they've got to make sure that later on a defense attorney like Josh Ritter doesn't come along and create reasonable doubt, saying, you know what, it could have been one of these 5 witnesses, but they had tunnel vision. They thought it was my client all along. So how important is this whole investigation right now, and each time they talk to somebody?
Hugely important. And it's good to see that they have some foresight and kind of a view towards trial, rather than just sort of myopically conducting their investigation, trying to find the bad guy. They're also trying to cut off any possible arguments of why it wouldn't be the suspect that they're looking into. So I like to see that. That shows a lot of really kind of seasoned police work, in my view, that they're thinking about how this could end up in trial and things that they want to do to preserve their case. Which is also remarkable too, if you are dealing with a county that does not deal with homicides all that much. So it's nice to see the people that they have involved sound like they're really thinking about this carefully. They're not getting caught off guard by the magnitude of it, meaning the fact that we're talking about it, the country is talking about it. It's got a lot of attention, and that they are not the type of county that deals with this a lot. They're not allowing that to get to them. It'll be interesting to see, because I agree with Scott. There's really only a couple of reasons why they would be having a press conference. One is to share information, and one is to ask for information. So I would imagine if they had someone in custody, perhaps we would have known by now. Maybe not. Maybe that's what this announcement's going to be about. But to me, if we don't already know that somebody's been arrested, which I imagine maybe Anjanette would have a better idea than I would about, you would think something like that would leak. But it seems to me maybe they have someone that they're looking for that might be identified in some video or a description of them, and they're going to share that information with the public, trying to get further tips and narrow it down to this person that they're looking for. Or they know who they're looking for and they just can't find them. And so this is kind of like a APB to the public to say, this is our person, this is who we want, if you know this person's whereabouts. But now that I've said all that, I'll probably be completely wrong.
And you know what, Josh, I'm going to agree with you. I feel like it probably would have leaked. Anjanette, you're in the middle of all this, covering this case. What do you think's going on here? Do you think they're asking for the public's help? We're going to find out, I hope, in about 16 minutes. And COE, if you're listening, which I hope you are, let's put up that Facebook page so I can see it, so we can keep an eye on it. Thank you. Go ahead, Anjanette.
Interesting, because I had something to kind of follow Josh up with this. When I asked them about the press conference today, I asked them over email, do you have somebody in custody? I just asked them that. Are you announcing an arrest? And they responded by saying, we're going to be releasing some potential suspect information. I find we're going to do it at 4, but oh wait, now we're going to do it at 7:30. that I feel like that's kind of weird. So that makes me think, oh, is it a big arrest announcement? And when I followed up my email, and I said, oh, are you releasing like a screen grab from a surveillance camera or something like that? They didn't respond. Now maybe they're getting flooded with information or requests from the media, but they didn't say, yeah, we're going to be releasing an image. They just said potential suspect information. And I tried to get into the jail roster system. I was having a little issue figuring out how they do it at that sheriff's office. I was going to go through and see if anybody's being held on a murder charge in there. So, but I didn't make it that far. So that was right before we came on.
That's a smart way to do it. Something I did not have time to do, which would have been a great thing to do. Tiff Knox, great Scott. It's great Scott. I saw you made a Caesar salad, Tiff Knox. That sounds pretty good. I will not confirm or deny if I had pizza tonight, which is something I was trying not to do, but what can you do? Great to see you on a Thursday, Scott, but we're going to Detective Ramos. So Detective Ramos, Sheriff Gahler here. I'm going to read you a quote. They've been very tight-lipped, and he said, we are being very careful, very selective in what we share, only sharing things that we feel will help advance the investigation forward. And we certainly recognize that many people in our community and outside of it are looking for answers. But I've been very careful to say that they cannot, meaning those answers, they cannot come at the expense of conducting a quality investigation. Again, you're the king of high-profile cases. How difficult is it to ward off not only the media, but the public when they're really hungry for answers?
Well, it's not difficult because you have to come out straightforward and say, look, we're only going to be able to tell you A, B, C, because we've got D, E, F, G, and H, but you have to have a certain amount of holdback because you can't divulge everything you know clearly and obviously because you're going to jeopardize the investigation. So you give enough information that will help if you need the help, or will kind of shut down some conspiracy theorists or accusations that are being made. But the other thing that has to be taken into consideration is the amount of information you release has to be run by the family. If they've got a potential suspect or someone that they know, the first people they're going to contact is the family. Does this person look familiar if it's on videotape? Or what do you know about this person? So the information that's going to be released will probably have already been run by the family waiting to get the news. They're the first ones that have to be notified anyway, regardless of how much media pressure there is and public pressure. The family is the first to be considered when you're going to get ready to make a release of this nature. So giving enough information that is going to help the case is the main purpose for, I would say, most press releases of this nature. But keep in mind, there's going to be a certain amount of holdback. They may give a grainy image of somebody walking down the street that came from somebody's home surveillance system or something like that, knowing that they're going to know a little bit more about that image or about that person than they're giving out. They just want to know if anybody else recognizes them or sees anything. And going back a little bit to those interviews with those witnesses, they're critically important. But that information that they give also has to be corroborated. They have to say, if they say we saw a red car driving by at about 3:00 in the afternoon, that may be good information, but they have to go back and corroborate that to make sure it's accurate. So everything that they get, if they're not able to corroborate it, kind of gives it a little less weight. But if they can corroborate it and say, yeah, that's absolutely spot on, we did have a red car going by, and that sometimes witnesses can be not as good witnesses as they would like to be, or as that we'd like them to be. So any information you get from a witness, you have to corroborate before you can really stand on it.
Chilo, straight out of Boston, where I got a headache doing a show about a Boston case, as you all know, on I don't know, Tuesday night. I forget the days now. Before the presser starts, I'm going to predict that they have not found out much of anything. I think it was random. Tilo, not one to mince words. I'm kind of leaning in Tilo's direction because of the mere fact that if someone was in custody, I feel like it would have leaked. And the fact that they readjusted the press conference, I feel like with a person in custody, if they were confident, they would have been more amenable to starting this press conference earlier. And Jeanette, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but it was interesting. Detective Sergeant Joe Jackalone from the NYPD. He's been on the show and he's coming back, I believe, Monday night. He tweeted out something that kind of caught my attention. He said, was it him, or does it seem like this case is not getting the attention that it deserves? We've been covering it, but he pointed to, more mainstream media outlets. What's the reaction been like at Law and Crime? Are people kind of hungry to find out what's going on with this case, or are they disinterested?
No, I think we've been just waiting to see if something would come out. Just in interviewing Sheriff Gahler, I have to kind of add that, he's been in law enforcement forever. Before he became sheriff, he was with the Maryland State Police for, I think, 27 years or something like that is what he told me. I don't know if he really did homicides while he was there. I think, they do more just obviously state patrol type things. But he seemed to be very tight-lipped. And I mean, even though I hate it when they don't tell us stuff, really that's the best way for them to do these investigations, is to not tell us stuff, even though it drives me insane and I want to know everything. So he, I think it probably would have leaked. I would have thought if they had an arrest, maybe they'd want it like on the 5 o'clock news or whatever, but maybe they don't think that way. I don't know. Am I a cynic, Joel? I mean, us in the news business, I feel like when they have big news to announce, they always want it like on the 5 o'clock news. They want the, as many eyeballs on it as they can get.
That's why I think that if they had a person in custody, and I'm sure I'll be wrong because it's Murphy's Law. Whenever you go one way, it always ends up the other. But I agree with you.
It's such a weird time.
It's a very weird time. It's like kind of buried. Josh Ritter. What do you make of it? You saw it, and there we see the Facebook page where this will air is now up, so I can breathe a sigh of relief for a moment, knowing that the COE is on top of everything. I would think they would have the suspect in custody because he or she could possibly be watching it and then hightail it out of the country, or their name was mentioned. Josh, what do you think of that comment? This is not a legal question, but how careful do authorities have to be with releasing information? Because if let's say there's a suspect out there and they're trying to find him, once this person knows they're looking for him, it could get tricky, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it sounds like the way that they've been conducting themselves, they are very careful. I mean, we talked about those witnesses that they were interviewing, the fact that they have been kind of close-lipped about a lot of the information because they're trying to preserve the integrity of the investigation. So I can't see them doing something kind of reckless, like just releasing a name and giving that person a heads up that they're, to hightail it out of the country. The only exception to that, to me, would be is if they absolutely knew who they were looking for and simply could not find that person, and they felt that they needed the help of the public to look for, here's help us find this person, like America's Most Wanted type of situation, to keep a lookout from this individual because they feel that he's, jumped out of the county, out of the state, and they just need all the resources that they can gather. My suspicion is, again, I agree with everybody that it seems like it would have been something we would have found out if they had somebody in custody. To me, it's going to be, and again, now that I'm saying this, I'm going to be wrong, but it's going to be one of those situations where here is who we're looking for. It is a person of this height, of this weight. They look like this. They were wearing this. They were in this location at this time. Anyone matching that description, please give us that information, because it sounds like the public's very involved, giving a lot of tips. Maybe they want to try to kind of clean up some of that so they're not getting a lot of tips that are leading them down the wrong path. And they can narrow it down to information that really concerns their suspect. And maybe that's the break they're looking for in the case.
And Jeanette, you had your hand raised there. Go for it.
And I forgot to add when I was talking the last time, I kind of didn't answer your question. I am surprised this hasn't gotten more attention. I'm not really sure why. You've got a mom of 5 kids. It does seem a little weird. We've been keeping our eye on it, but usually in a case like this, I feel like there would be a lot of like media swarming to it. I don't know if the wildfires in Maui, maybe that's taking too many resources from national news networks and things like that, but you haven't really seen a lot out there. And you also have not seen this woman's family out there. At least I haven't. So we haven't seen her family members out there doing interviews and pleading for information. So it makes you wonder if they have a suspicion or suspect someone, or they think they know what was going on with
That's
her,
great.
or that somebody was stalking her, or maybe it's a disgruntled former ex. I just don't know.
Yeah, and the mother, as I know you know this, posted on Facebook, as did the boyfriend, but we have not seen them in front of cameras. Leah, my favorite new channel. Thank you. Glad to have you here. Christina Jones, nice to see Scott on a day other than Friday. Listen, I never bug Scott because he helps me out and comes on the show as a regular guest on Fridays. But if you guys all want him, I'll bug him for you, and we'll get him on more than just once a week. Hi, SDS fam. Better late than never. Ooh, Scott Duffey on a not Friday. Yes, that would be a Thursday. Shout out to Tali in Israel, Jersey, Jen Castaldi. Hope you're doing well. Scott Duffey, simple question. When do you guys, meaning law enforcement, investigators, when do you go to the public for help, if this is what this is about?
Whenever necessary. So if you need information and you also are wanting to put out a word for the public, if law enforcement felt, hey, there's somebody who's on the loose who's randomly killing people, and that person hasn't been found, and so thereby we don't have enough information to say that it's contained or whatever have you, they're going to put that information out for the sake of the public. Even if it's just local, like on their Facebook page or reverse 911, whatever calls that, however they contact their residents in the county. And then, of course, in this manner, hey, we have information. So I don't know if it's a teaser. We have some information, potential suspect, and then the press conference takes place, and it's not maybe what we're expecting, but it's information that's going to get out there, and so people are tuned in. It's pretty interesting to see how this has been unfolding, and totally agree with the panel until you brought it up. And here it's really not that far from my neck of the woods, and I have not seen it once aired on my local news.
Interesting. Real quick, AJ, before we get to you, COE and Space Coast, give me a sign of life, because this is coming up in about a minute's time. So go ahead, Anjanette, but let's try to start pulling up that Facebook page. By the way, shout out to Kaya Gee from Maryland. And this is an interesting comment real quick, Anjanette. I submitted a tip, TYO Toy says. Suspicious guy I saw on a trail 2 hours from Bel Air, Maryland. Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Anjanette.
I just wanted to point this out, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up too much time talking, but I was just looking around after you mentioned the mother of Rachel and the boyfriend, Richard Tobin, who had been razzed quite a bit. People were pointing the finger at him a lot on Facebook. He posted on Facebook 4 hours ago, guys. I hope he shared the Harford County Sheriff's Office announcement that there was going to be a press conference, and he posted above it, I hope they found this scum of the earth, justice for Rachel, heart, RIP, praying hands, love you, Rach, heart. So he was not in custody as of 4 hours ago. So there were a lot of people kind of pointing the finger at him because he's had past criminal record, but the police had said they had interviewed him. The sheriff's office had interviewed him. They didn't say he was or was not a suspect.
And I'm just looking here at my notes. Again, COE and Space Coast. Let's start to pull up, unless you're monitoring it, but let me know one way or the other if you can. So Detective Ramos, back to you. I had another question for you, but we'll circle back around. Let's say that they do say they need help looking for someone. That's a hypothetical. We should know the answer shortly. Should we assume then that the boyfriend, who's got a questionable past, a checkered past, is not the guy? We're bringing this up now. I think
her death has grabbed local, state, national, and international headlines. Everyone with the same goal: find the killer and bring justice to Rachel. DNA evidence is part of nearly every modern day investigation, and in Rachel's case, DNA evidence was collected by our Forensic Services Unit. That DNA was analyzed by the Maryland State Police, and it was ran through the National CODIS system. This DNA evidence has come back as a match, tied to a home invasion and an assault of a young girl in Los Angeles this past March. Unfortunately, that suspect has not been positively identified, but he did leave behind his DNA. Based on the DNA evidence, we consider the individual in the video we obtained from the Los Angeles Police Department and that we are about to show you on our TV screens to be the person that murdered Rachel Morin on August 5th. So we're now going to show the video. And just so everyone's aware, this video, after this press conference, this video will be posted on our social media. All right, you want to play it one more time? Okay. When you're ready, we're going to post it on our social media. Based on our analysis of this video and witness observations, we believe the suspect to be approximately 5'9", 160 pounds, and of Hispanic descent. If you have any information about this suspect, we are asking you to please call our detectives at our tip line. And the tip line number is 410-836-7788. And we've also established a dedicated tip email address, and that email address is rmtips@harfordsheriff.org. Again, that's RM as in Rachel Morin, tips@harfordsheriff.org. We want to make it clear that we believe the suspect acted alone, and he doesn't represent the entire Hispanic community of Harford County, who we are now partnering with to identify this suspect. I know I can speak for the sheriff when I say we are immensely proud of this community. Our community will not be defined by this tragedy. Our community is one that will work together to get the job done and bring this suspect to justice. In the meantime, in the light of this new evidence, I urge our citizens to use caution while walking on our trails and throughout our community. Be alert, walk with a friend, don't allow yourself to be distracted by your cell phone or headphones. And finally, if you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable or that you think is suspicious, act on those instincts and call 911. And lastly, we will continue our increased presence on the Mom Pod Trail. And now I'll open it up to questions.
Colonel, do you have any other details on what happened in Los Angeles, exactly where, or you know, anything about what this person did there?
So when it comes to the details about Los Angeles, that's the information that the Los Angeles Police Department has, and we were just going to refer people to the Los Angeles Police Department to get those details. Only thing I can tell you is an attack on a young girl.
Any word about a possible motive? Like, was Rachel missing any money or anything like that?
So we are not going to talk about the crime scene at this time because, as I've said in previous interviews, we don't want to talk about the crime scene or what happened at the crime scene because once we catch this person, we want to make sure we got the right person, and the only people that know what happened at that crime scene when we catch the person is us and that suspect. So we're not giving any details about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Again, how did you come across, what led you to this particular suspect, this person?
So we collected DNA from our crime scene. The Maryland State Police analyzed that DNA for us, ran it through the National CODIS system, and that came back as a match to the crime that occurred in Los Angeles, where they had recovered DNA from this person that you saw in the video.
The video that we watched, tell us about it. I mean, what Los Angeles Police released it to you, but what is it? Is it at his home? Is it at a scene of a crime?
That is at a home, and that is the suspect leaving the scene of the crime there.
And that was a home invasion and assault, you said, right?
Correct.
Of a little girl, is that what you said?
A young girl. So I'm going to leave it at a young girl. I don't want to talk about the family there, but it was a young girl in the house that got assaulted.
What does this do to the case, Colonel? You have an image now of the person you think is believed to be
Correct.
responsible for this. What does that do for the case?
Well, I think now it kind of leads us down the path that we believe this was a person that Rachel probably didn't know. Maybe you could say potentially a random act of violence. And we're hoping that the community now can watch that video, and we also got still pictures that we're going to be putting out, and that somebody can identify him.
Have you narrowed it down to a certain area? Do you think he could still be like somewhere on the Manhunt Trail?
We don't have any clue where he could be. We don't even know if he's still in Harford County or in the state of Maryland, because obviously in March he was in California, and then here in August he was here in Maryland. So we don't know if he's still here or not.
Do you have any evidence that he was targeting people along that trail, or do you believe this was, completely random?
I'd only be speculating. We do not know.
Do you think he may be armed, any weapons or anything like that?
Again, speculation.
You described him, Colonel, as 5'9", 160, Hispanic male. Do we have an approximate age, or?
Oh yeah, we believe he's in his low to mid 20s.
Do you know do you have a date for when the Los Angeles invasion happened?
I'm just going to put out that it was in March. The Los Angeles Police Department knows that we're doing this press conference, so if you called them, they would probably be able to give you that information.
How rare is this to have a DNA hit from the other side of the country, and can you talk about that whole process and how that worked?
I mean, this is the first time I've seen a hit in a case that I've been involved in that was that far away for a DNA hit. So I wouldn't say that it's unheard of, but certainly unusual.
For the record, you don't have his name or
no, that's what we're looking for.
Like where he lived or anything like that. Is he from LA or?
We don't know.
Okay.
We know nothing more about him other than he was in LA and committed that crime in March, and he was here in August and is the murderer, we believe to be the murderer of Rachel Morin.
To follow up on that question, you identified him through DNA evidence through this database. So there's no name associated with that?
No. There's no name associated because it's just evidence from a crime that was submitted. And his DNA on it, like being arrested and getting DNA, none of that is in the system. However, we are working with, we have called the FBI, and we are working with some of their DNA experts in their crime lab to try to help us further analyze this DNA.
Without compromising the investigation, can you tell us, Rachel was found.
Correct.
And it was determined that it was a homicide.
Correct.
Was there trauma? Was she beaten? What was the nature of the homicide?
All we've said so far, and I think we're going to leave it at that, is that it was a violent attack.
What's your message?
No relationship at all between Rachel and the suspect?
Well, again, we just got this information last night. Not that we have been able to determine yet that we don't know of any relationship or that they were known to each other before this incident. So I can't really say, but right now, no.
Obviously, this is it already has the community on the edge right
Absolutely.
now. We have somebody out here who just murdered someone. What's your message to the community? Obviously, people are scared, out here.
Yeah, we want our community to be vigilant. Obviously, the Manhunt Trail has been open since the day after Rachel was discovered. We have a very large amount of deployment on the Manhunt Trail. We are going to continue that deployment until either this person is caught or we believe he's not in the area anymore. But our plan is to be vigilant for our community. Our community has been just tremendous with the support they give us and trying to figure out what's going on and calling in tips. And we're hoping maybe even people from LA will see this interview and see that this person committed that crime there, and maybe somebody knows him. We believe and we hope that somebody who actually knows this suspect that's in the video will be able to identify him for us.
Forgive me if you said this. Are you revealing where the DNA was found?
No.
Was it under fingernails?
No,
or
we're not going to reveal that.
That video was from Los Angeles.
That video is from
after the assault.
Yeah, that was the suspect leaving the assault that occurred in March in Los Angeles.
Doorbell cam, right?
I mean,
Or home security cam.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel.
And you were watching that live on STS Nation, a press conference related to a suspect in the Rachel Morin murder, and authorities in Harford County now making it public that they believe they know who the suspect is, but they don't know a name. They don't know where he is, which changes the whole dynamic. It also appears to rule out people that the court of public opinion, including us, for being honest here on STS Nation, names we were rolling around like the ex-boyfriend, Richard Tobin. It appears he is in the clear in all this. I just want to go through a little bit, and then we're going to turn to the experts here. That was not the sheriff speaking, by the way. That was Colonel William Davis of the Harford County Sheriff's Office. He said that they had enough DNA. They ran it through the Maryland State Police Lab. And that came back with a hit when they ran the DNA through CODIS, the national database. And that matched, and I see a lot of people talking about this, and we'll have some of the law enforcement guys discuss this, but that matched a person. However, that person was not identified from an other crime entirely across the country in Los Angeles back in March. It was a home invasion and an assault. All the colonel would say was it was of a young girl, and they're now looking for, this is a very vague description, a guy in his 20s, 5'9", 160 pounds, Hispanic background, they believe. That could be 50% of this country, basically. It was a guy with a high and tight haircut. There's more to get to, but Phil Ramos, detective, to you, your reaction to the press conference.
Massive find for them, and kudos to the FBI and CODIS. Here's how that works. This guy committed a crime in LA. They were able to get a big enough DNA profile that it was CODIS eligible. Not every DNA profile is CODIS eligible. They have a lot of requirements. So it gets put into the national database, and then you just wait to see what happens. The fact that they don't have an identity simply means that this guy's DNA had not been voluntarily placed into some kind of database. So from there, we have what's called crime scene hits, and that's exactly what happened here. They have enough of a DNA profile in Maryland to enter it into CODIS, and once it's in CODIS, CODIS does its thing, and boom, there's a match. And the fact that it was 3,000 miles away in California is just astounding, but it just tells you how great technology has gotten right now. And this never would have been possible a few years ago without CODIS, and it's just an incredible program. So the second part is you've eliminated all kinds of other people. Now you know exactly who you're looking for. You just don't know who he is. I thought it was interesting in that video from LA that when he walked out of that crime scene, he backed out and had his back towards the camera. That tells me that he knew that he was on video surveillance. You know, when you're fleeing a crime scene, you don't back out and just quietly walk away. You kick the door and get the hell out of there. So this is just a huge development. It really gives them a place to go now. So the next step is the forensic genealogy. People are going to start digging into their databases and see if they can match the DNA that's in CODIS with the forensic genealogy programs. And, you know, that's exactly what they did in Idaho. They had a profile, they didn't know who it was, so they started genealogy work on it, and that's how they came up with it. And that's what's going to happen here.
Scott Duffey, STS Nation, as smart as they get. I always say best guess, better community. No offense to you guys on the panel, but the best community. And right away, they're noticing something about this video that I did not catch. Autumn Blaze 78. If that video was a home invasion, why did someone close the door behind him like he was a visitor, followed by Bacon? Someone behind the door was showing their arms and closing the door behind him. Any thoughts on that? I didn't notice that, but a lot of people are commenting about that. What might that be if this guy was committing a crime?
So a couple of things. I can see the colonel's being very limited in anything he says about LA, and so doesn't want to interfere with anything that they may already be doing. And I can already tell you they're lockstep with each other, trying to now identify what we have as a cross country at a serial rapist, and of course now homicide. So you're talking about he's checking all the boxes for violence, and then and being very transient from one coast to the next. But what wasn't said, and what could be my thought on, you could be talking about a juvenile. And so sexual assault doesn't mean that it's taken by, force. You could have someone who's just not able to consent. And so thereby it's a sexual assault. So you may very well have some sort of chance meeting. You may have some sort of internet connection there. Somebody shows up at a home, and then of course commits a sexual assault. It may not have been a violent act in what we know now took place in Maryland, but it very well could have been someone who absolutely whatever happened behind closed doors and is now pretty much saying goodbye, whatever, with this individual. The door is closed somewhat voluntarily, and as Detective Ramos said, you know, very well aware of this camera, which also tells me he knows he committed a crime at scene number 1. Thereby, I'm pretty sure he is going to be responsible for other similar crimes yet to identify.
Linda also chiming in. Yeah, who closed the door behind him? Josh Ritter, to you, this other crime happened in your neighborhood, not necessarily your exact neighborhood, but where you are in Los Angeles. Looking ahead, which this is your world, to a potential, you know, assuming they apprehend this guy one day, they arrest him, get him in custody, and he goes to trial. How does it complicate things legally now that we're told he committed a crime basically 3,000 miles away on the other coast of the United States?
Well, it complicates it to the extent that he's going to have 2 separate trials, you know, one in each state. They're each going to have to decide where he's going to serve that time first. If they're, you know, I'm putting a lot of cart before the horse here, if they're able to apprehend him and convict him. But as far as will it somehow complicate each individual trial? No, not all that much. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many trials take place where they do have to call out of state witnesses. And I imagine each one of these trials will somehow be using information and evidence from the out of state crime in their own individual crime. One thing too, if I could kind of skip around for a second, that I wanted to kind of comment on that. I know we're doing a lot of, or at least I am doing a little bit of speculating with just the limited amount of information that we have. But something that was interesting to me is that the idea that you have now a person who has committed, you know, more than one, whether you want to call it violent crime, extremely risky type of crime. One is obviously violent with the murder. We didn't get many details about what took place in LA, but they're calling it a home invasion, highly dangerous type of situation. So this person is obviously got something hardwired into them that is causing them to be compelled to commit crime. Yet it's remarkable to me that he's not in a database already, which usually means that they have not encountered law enforcement to the extent that they've committed a felony, which would have their DNA entered into a database.
Sorry, we're just replaying the video, and that's the audio.
Yeah.
Can we mute that audio, COE? Thanks. But that's the video. Go ahead, Josh.
No, that's basically my point, is that it's bizarre to me that you have someone who's taking part in such risky and obviously now escalating behavior. Yet, if we can make the assumption that he has never been arrested and been in custody to the extent that his DNA profile is not already entered in the system, that's kind of a remarkable thing to me that I think is worth commenting on.
Anjanette, I was coming to you, but I got to go to Detective Ramos on this. Let's keep playing this for a second. Detective Ramos, now you clearly see, I was doing 10 things at once, but now you clearly see someone else closing the door. You see a hand there.
Yeah.
Colonel Davis said that this was from the crime scene in Los Angeles. Is it possible he misspoke? What do you make of this? Because someone is literally letting this guy go. How do you read this?
So what I'm seeing is it looked like a very small framed individual. There, you know, that's a small arm. It's not a very big, and this guy doesn't even have a shirt on. I mean, he's got his pants or shorts on. He still doesn't have a shirt on. My impression is, the very first thing that they mentioned, like Josh had mentioned, it was a home invasion. So that means this person wasn't invited over. However, they may have been known to the victim inside, and the victim might have just been in survival mode and saying, "Oh, I won't call the cops. Here, just go. Just leave me alone. Don't come back." That's the impression I get, because he's in a hurry. Obviously, he's in a hurry. They didn't give very many details about the sexual assault, and somebody else mentioned it. Was it a violent rape? Was it something other than that, but still as a sex crime? It's hard to say because they didn't give that information, but you can clearly see right there that if this was a friendly encounter, he would at least still have his clothes on, but he was in a hurry to get out of it. And in fact, he's got his pants on. May or may not have something to do with the level of the sexual crime that was committed there, but I think the victim was just in survival mode and glad that he's gone and she's still alive.
It's so fascinating to me to listen to guys like Detective Ramos and Scott Duffey in real time as this stuff is going on and how they analyze it so differently than me. I never would have even thought of that. I'm a little slow on the uptake, but while I have you here, Detective Ramos, this comment is interesting. And I know you dealt with your fair share of gangs. In LA County, new gangster members have to kill random people. Just happened here. People shot in their car watching sunset in the parking lot one night, as an example. Does this have the hallmarks, in your opinion, of some sort of gang murder? Or this sounds more like a criminal element, as Scott said, potentially a serial rapist here?
Yeah, I think Scott was spot on that one. Yeah, while it's true, LA gang members do have to commit a murder, they don't have to go across the country to do it, because how are his homies going to know that he was responsible for the murder back in Maryland? So that part of the comment, yeah, that was accurate. They do, not all the time, but they do have to do that. I don't see that being the case in Maryland. I don't think this was a gang related initiation, right, by committing that kind of crime over there. Gang members don't have the charters all over the country, as it were, not like outlaw motorcycle gangs do. LA gangs, I don't think you're going to find members in Maryland, but I don't think this had anything to do with the gang.
And Scott, to you, since we have the two law enforcement guys here, and then let's remove this comment so we can see Anjanette. But Dom's mom, someone made a good point. If there's video of him leaving, should they have video of him coming to, Scott, or is it maybe he broke in through a window? What's your take?
Yeah, everything above. If I thought it was mentioned that there might have been some sort of familiar, not that they have a name of a person, but the fact that there might be some previous familiarity. So it's possible he goes in the back door, back window, but is well aware that there's a Ring camera if he didn't come through that front door, so he knows enough not to show his face. So it's but at the same time, I still feel like there's very limited information given out, and this is where you use the media enough to where you want to make people aware, but it's also possible law enforcement has more and needs to work on that while providing enough to caution. I thought the colonel did a great job. Hey, buddy up and do this and be very aware, be alert while not only on that walking path, that trail, but in the surrounding areas. So, it will remain to be seen, but that was also crossing my mind. If he's walking out backwards, how was he walking in if he used that same door? So there may be more video and they have it for their own purposes.
And Anjanette, you with us?
I am.
Yeah, you bounced out. So I was going to come to you now. Hearing what we did in the press conferences, and there's more to go through, but we have these amazing guests, so I'm picking their brains as we go through the details. But to you, so we now know that they're looking for someone, but that person, they do not have a name. They don't know where he is. How does this change the dynamic in terms, do you think, for public interest? Because now there is a killer on the loose. You think there will be increased interest in this now when you go to Law and Crime tomorrow and do your thing?
Possibly. I mean, we've been interested in it, but there's just been so little information. It kind of made you think they either have people they are looking for, or they have a good idea of who did this, or they're just waiting for that DNA to come back, things like that. And obviously they were waiting for the DNA to come back. We have video now. This is officially, in my opinion, a manhunt. You know, I'm just the news person here, like you, Joel, but there's a manhunt underway now. This is a nationwide manhunt for this person. They said they're working with the Hispanic community. And what's particularly concerning to me and terrifying to me about this guy is the fact that he's accused of assaulting a child. So I'm assuming that the arm we see closing the door is a child who maybe doesn't have the wherewithal to fight back or the wherewithal to do anything but just shut that door and get this guy out of my house. We don't know if she was threatened with some type of harm, maybe her family. But now what's more terrifying to me is the fact that we have a guy who assaulted in some fashion a child and then goes cross country, basically 3,000 miles away, and kills a woman. And God only knows what he did to her before he killed her. I'm assuming maybe she fought back. That's just my, conclusion that I'm drawing. And that may have been why, sadly, she was killed. But I find this terrifying because he's escalated. He's gone from harming a child, and he's probably done it before and just not been caught, to going 3,000 miles away and taking the life of a woman.
And that's a good point that there is escalation there. Obviously, sexually assaulting a young girl. There's nothing worse. Josh, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just one kind of small point that's really kind of straightforward and simple that I thought is worth making as well, is that it's obvious that the Los Angeles law enforcement knows as little about him as they do in Maryland, because they also don't have a suspect. They're willing to give this information out too, because they're looking for this person and know as much about him as we do. If there was more information, in other words, about this individual, we would have heard about it tonight. But the only thing that Los Angeles has to share is this one video. And I think there probably is no other video showing a better angle of him. And I guess the point being is that now we have a person who's both evaded authorities and investigations in two different jurisdictions, and is obviously a person who's committing crimes against random people, and that no one who's the victim, the only surviving victim that we know of, is able to identify him in any kind of way that gives us any useful information beyond what we see in that video there.
Again, I say it all the time. So why we have the best guest, but that's a great point that maybe LA has nothing either. And this is a big country, and he's obviously crossing. Anjanette, go ahead.
I mean, this raises the question with me, Josh. Why didn't LA put this out sooner if you have somebody who is committing a home invasion and assaulting a child? I mean, they could have put this video out whenever they got it because they hadn't identified the person.
I thought about that too. And I think the sad state of affairs is that Los Angeles probably has a lot of videotapes like this with unidentified people that they simply don't know who they are. But now that they've got a link of that person to a unsolved murder across the country, it's probably worth releasing that information.
Detective Ramos, do you want to jump in on that? You're close to LA, out there in Vegas. You know how they work. Why would they not have released this video? Are they just overwhelmed with the amount of crimes out there?
Well, they are overwhelmed. They have those kinds of crimes by the dozens all the time. But we don't know that they didn't do that. This was back in March. And this wasn't such a high profile case that it would have gotten national attention. They may have, made one blurb on the 6 o'clock news or something like that. But if they didn't, it would be because they were so overwhelmed and they didn't have enough, to say, what would be the point of putting this video out? Is it going to generate any tips or any calls or anything like that? It's hard to say. But my best guess is if they didn't, they probably had a good reason for it. I don't think that they just were being ambivalent about it and saying, hey, there's going to be more details to that crime in LA than what's been released, which may explain why they didn't publicize it. But like I said, we don't know that they didn't. It was back in March.
That's a good point too. Maybe they did. Scott Duffey, to you from Ann Chapman, not to put you on the spot here, you can talk more generally, but she wants to know the percentage of false positive DNA matches. And then I'm seeing people here saying, I don't buy it. Scott Duffey, do you buy what the colonel had to say?
With regards to the CODIS match?
Yes.
Yeah. I've had 2 cases in my career with a CODIS match. Ultimately, as Detective Ramos said, it's a great sample. It meets all the standards to be entered into CODIS, and so thereby it's just waiting for another submittal so it can do a match. And then ultimately the way it worked with me, and I imagine the way it works all around, is that the case detective, the lead detective, whatever, the lead detective gets contacted saying, "Hey, there's a CODIS match for another case, and so we're going to put you together with the lead detective from the other case," and so I believe that's probably what transpired here, and so yeah, it's, I mean, I feel pretty confident with the way CODIS works and with everything, as opposed to some quick analysis of 2 different. It's CODIS is very strict, and there, I remember as you have something and you're waiting for that phone call. I remember calling the CODIS, let's just say an analyst at that point, saying, "Can you give me the information?" They're like, "No, we have to do our report to ensure its accuracy, and then as soon as we can, you'll get the information of how to follow up." So CODIS is there just to pair um, investigators together so they can do their own homework. So I feel pretty confident they have their match, and they have an individual that's known now for 2 matches, right? And it's very possible there are other matches elsewhere, and those cases, the lead detective of other cases is being contacted, and it's possible that Maryland, knowing now you have a sexual assault in California, they're dealing with it, but now you have a murder and so one case trumps another case in the escalation of force here. So they felt compelled, for the sake of the community, get that information out. But there may very well be other cases that are being paired up, and investigators doing their homework to do their own, whatever it is, and sharing of information with other detectives.
And whoever says I don't let Scott talk enough is mistaken. Scott, right back to you for a quick answer on this, because this is still going around the chat. People are very confused. I don't understand. You have the man on cam, you have his DNA, but you have no ID. Can you just explain why that is real quick?
Yeah, so their CODIS has expanded over the years. So, for example, you have known samples of an identified individual, and so thereby you have the name of an individual. For example, you have a convicted felon. A convicted felon is then required to provide their DNA in the system. That now goes into the database, just very much like fingerprints, and so somewhere around the country, something happens where there's a like-minded fingerprint or DNA sample, connections can be made, and so you have IDs. There's also known samples that, hey, we have a great sample of it's not a mixed DNA, so it is a sample that meets very strict rigorous standards to be submitted, and so thereby it's submitted. We don't have yet the name of an individual, because, as Detective Ramos said, it wasn't voluntarily provided or through a search warrant or some other way where you have an individual who is providing that DNA to be placed into a database. There are different levels of a database. There are databases that where there's a sharing of information, but it's not for the index where you have known convicted felons or crimes that rise to where their DNA now permanently goes into a system, just like their fingerprint. Here you have a great DNA sample from LA. It meets the standards. It's an assault, a sexual assault, and so thereby it's submitted, put into CODIS, and there's another term called VICAP. So you have a similar cases that are looking to be paired. So this way, law enforcement can put their ducks in a row and say, hey, we have multiple cases with one offender, and that's what's happening here in real time. This is somebody who is out there, who is on the loose, and I would also hope that now is the time where this is going to be on the national news, getting everybody aware of what's happening.
Yeah, I think this definitely heightens the media attention. I think we're going to see that with a quote unquote killer on the loose, possibly a serial rapist as well. Detective Ramos, right away, STS Nation, being the sleuths that they are, said, is there a military base nearby? Because that would maybe make some sense as to why he's from one end of the country to the other. Michelle says Fort Meade in Maryland, a military base. If you're the lead investigator here, Detective Ramos, you're going off an incredibly vague description. Where do you go next? What do you do now? You got to unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
You pick the brains of the LA guys and get all the information you can from them. There was a very good point made that why wasn't the victim in LA able to identify who this person was? And that's a good question. I would ask that question myself. There's probably a reason why that wasn't released, but now you go to the information that you have, and by a process of elimination, you get rid of everybody else that you were looking at and just work on that, because they're checking everybody that was there. They're checking every cell phone that pinged a tower nearby there. And if you've got enough information, you could eliminate everybody that's there. It narrows down the field of suspects, obviously. So that gives you a place to start. It's a much better place to be in than they were 3 days ago. But you still have a who done it, but you know who the who done it is. You just can't put a name to the face. And you know, like we mentioned, like Scott said, that there's reasons for that. This guy committed a crime. They still don't know who he is, but we've got his profile in the system, and not every DNA profile qualifies for entry into CODIS. So they may have partial profiles on this guy in different parts of the country that CODIS isn't going to hit because they didn't have enough of a profile to meet CODIS standards. And going back to the question that somebody had, how many false positives have there been in CODIS? I don't know of any, and I've had hundreds of CODIS hits. They just don't happen. The science behind CODIS is such that, in my view, there can't be any false positives. But I have to put an asterisk after that. Identical twins have the same DNA profile. So a lot of people don't know that, and but it's kind of common knowledge. An identical twin will have the same DNA profile as each other.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The COE just put this up. Someone asked why we don't have a still photo. I don't think they've been disseminated yet, just the video. But the tip email here for email tips is rmtips at harfordsheriff.org. STS Nation, do your thing. We are nationwide. We are global, but we have people from Maryland all the way to LA, and we're going to get that still photo up as well once we get it. So Anjanette, among the things the colonel said, he said, use caution, walk with a friend, don't be distracted by cell phone headphones. You're a woman, the only woman on this panel. How fearful do you think women in that area are now, considering this seems like a random attack and a killer is still not caught? Would you have pause if you were a regular hiker? Would you not go hiking for a few days?
I'd be pretty worried. I know they've stepped up the police presence around there. I certainly wouldn't go on that trail alone right now. I'm not sure I would go on that trail alone after this at all, just because of what's happened. I like to go out and walk. I like to I would love to be a runner, but I'm just not. But, I think about it, and I do the same thing in my neighborhood, and I don't even go out like toward dusk or dark in my own neighborhood to walk, even if I want to, just because you just can't be too careful. So I would think that if you weren't paying attention before, I think so many people were speculating that it had to be a boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend or something like that. There was so much speculation about that. Maybe people thought it was an intimate partner kind of crime. Now we know it's not. So I would sure hope people are sitting up and taking notice. I think it's, as I said, I think it's terrifying. And then, Joel, didn't you have a comment earlier from somebody, or did you read something where you said that a guy was seen on a trail a couple of hours away or something like that? Didn't you mention that earlier?
There was a similar crime that happened, I believe, 50 miles away, where a woman was killed in sort of a similar fashion.
Yeah.
So obviously they've got to be going back. Scott Duffey, they've got to be taking a second look at that now, right? For full disclosure, I don't know a lot of the details of that case, but there've been some comments in the chat. But if there was a similar crime just 50 miles away, Scott, they've got to be revisiting that, correct? And by the way, before you go, Scott, Nicole S., Aberdeen Proving Ground is right up the street, followed by this right next to it. Aberdeen Proving Grounds is a stone's throw away. There's a lot of Army personnel in the area. STS Nation seems to think maybe it is someone from the United States military. But Scott, how do they look at other crimes related to this one now?
So just to touch upon your point, you're absolutely right. If there's a crime, but we already have two coasts that are shown to be part of this case. So it's really broad, and anything is now open, as opposed to, let's just say, LA wasn't where the hit was, but Delaware or DC was the hit. So at least you're still in somewhat of a contained area. But yes, they're absolutely looking at similar cases. I'm sure you have detectives where the case went cold, and now they're saying, hey, that fits similar to my case, and they're reaching out, trying to see if maybe they have something that can add to what seems to be most important now, is IDing this person, getting him arrested. So, but yes, I see with not only the comments, the possibility of a military connection. Yeah, there's absolutely the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. There's plenty of governmental institutions there, and it will be interesting, as I imagine journalism will do, in a deep dive into the LA, because it's the colonel did right by saying, hey, I just can't give more information, but I have a feeling with a little bit of looking, there is more information that's already out there on the California case. But I just have a feeling the way listening to the colonel live, he was very good at keeping everything close to the vest. So I'm pretty confident they have more. This was a requirement to put information out for the sake of the community, because it is now, from what we're learning, a random act, right? That sends up lots of signals. And
Scott, it's interesting. The colonel, I went back and looked at the language. He said a potential random act. Why would he say that?
It might just be been his choice of words. It's we're speculating, right? So you have an individual that's closing the door in LA, even though the colonel says home invasion. And a home invasion could be as simple as, hey, you don't have my permission to come in, or you used other pretenses to get into my house. It may not be the type of home invasion we typically see, and that's busting through the door. It may very well be there is an internet connection here. Perhaps he finds his way to this victim and makes his way. Perhaps they're not showing the incoming because the victim and the suspect are walking in the door hand in hand, and so thereby, for the sake of, till they do some editing, they're just not going to put it out there for media consumption. But it looks like he's walking away. He does not seem to be too worried. And so is it possible, whatever happens in Maryland, that there is some sort of intermediary connection through the internet, whatever have you, and then of course winds up what turns out to be a murder. Now we have DNA, so there's not much being said, but it probably can be taken here that it was a sexual assault that escalated to a homicide, especially knowing what we have now in LA.
And COE, let's get him coming right out the door and freeze it right there-ish. Yes, me, it looks like a military haircut. I saw a person posting from LA who said this is a popular haircut among young Latinos in LA. She's from there. I don't know if that is true, but that looks like a military haircut to me. And the guy seems to be pretty physically fit. So that's about the best angle we're going to get of this guy right there. It's a tough image to get, as my boxer is letting her voice be heard, which is driving me crazy. The studio's coming soon, everybody. Don't worry. Josh Ritter, to you. The colonel's wording was interesting. As a journalist, I'm always listening to that. He said, once we catch this person, the only person who's going to know the details is us and the suspect. Very confident that they will get him, but this seems like it's a much tougher case than people initially thought. How important, my question to you, are optics right now to present a position of power? We're onto this. We've got a suspect. We're going after him. And how careful do you have to be? Because they might have absolutely no idea, it sounds like, where this guy is.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before. This is a suspect at large. He's got a panicked community. Now they believe this is a random attack. He's committed another crime across the entire country. I think he has to some extent, give this air of in control. We're on top of it. We're going to catch this person, because otherwise he's going to have a very panicked community on his hands if he doesn't already. But I paid attention to that comment that he made as well. And he was making it in regards to, I think it was in regards to questions and about how much information he was willing to give out. And he said, we're not going to go into the details of our case because we want to make sure that when we catch him, the only person who has those details are him and us. And again, that's really smart police work. And again, that's really far-sighted police work, because they're thinking about making sure that there's no argument to be made that there's some sort of false confession. If they're able to get a hold of this person that they believe who it is and starts confessing to it, that there could be the idea, well, he was somehow given that information from the media. He learned these details, and that's the only thing that he was doing, is really giving them back their own details in this confession. And so they're making sure to just even preserve every last element of their case, even down to what information they hope to get from the suspect, if he's willing to even speak with them. But they want to make sure that whatever information they get with them, they can corroborate that against the evidence that they have and collected, that they know no one else has access to. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
Through the lens of a defense attorney, former prosecutor. Detective Ramos, to you from Karma Justice. What are the chances that he's committed a second crime? Just on Saturday, this would be a third crime. 10-year-old in Texas found murdered in her home, sexual assault, strangulation, and head trauma. Any possible connections? And that's followed. I don't know if these are the same incidents. Guatemalan girl was killed exactly 1 week after Rachel. Young girl lived in an apartment complex which had high Guatemalan population. Guatemalans often have lighter skin, lots of European blood. It just goes to the question now, Detective Ramos, if you're the lead investigator and you hear that a 10-year-old has been murdered in this way, going back to this comment, in Texas, are you immediately getting on the phone with those authorities to try to see if there's some sort of connection? I'll leave the question there, because I want to ask you, how long does it take for the DNA also to potentially find a match? But just off of what you're hearing here? You're the lead investigator. You hear about a very similar crime in Texas now. Are you calling them?
Somebody will, maybe not the lead investigator, because he's going to be inundated with things that he has to do, or lead investigators, however many there are. But somebody may call, but you're going to have cases like this all over the country. And by many times, there's going to be very similarities, because the general characteristics of this are pretty common when you have crimes of this nature. So to say that every crime that had the same modus operandi could be related to this guy, it's possible, but it's very unlikely. But then, you have to check and see if there's been any DNA at these other crime scenes. If there are they CODIS eligible? If they're not CODIS eligible, is there a partial comparison that can be made? So while it is a possibility, the probability of it is probably pretty low, because, like I said, these kind of crimes, unfortunately, the world we live in, happen all the time in every city across the country.
And Detective Ramos, a lot of people here have been asking about investigative genetic genealogy now, going to GEDmatch and building like a family tree off of that DNA. Is that being done right now already?
Yeah, you bet. That's going to be one of the first things they do, especially since there was no match in CODIS as far as a name. The fact that they've got a good enough profile to put in the CODIS, they are going to, and there'll be genealogists volunteering to work on this. So yeah, the forensic genealogy is going to be key, and you can bet they've already started on that. That takes a long time, though. Trying to establish a connection through a forensic genealogy tree takes a lot of time. I've seen it take weeks, if not months, because there's so many people that have to be compared.
And that's not good news if it's weeks or months, because this guy could strike again. All about the shade. I believe family, friends, associates, someone will recognize him. Even with that video, they will know his travel and physique, physical gait, etc. Stephen Palazzo says he's already headed to Florida. I hope not, because I'm in Florida, so stay away from here. To you, Anjanette, so when I had Detective Sergeant Chris Anderson and Jennifer Coffendoffer from the FBI on last night, we talked. Ted Williams, who's a retired detective out of Washington, D.C., he was talking about the old Chandra Levy case from 2004, I believe it was. And she was found murdered, and people pointed their finger at then Congressman Gary Condit, and it turned out to be an MS-13 gang member.
Mm-hmm.
But Ted Williams said to Fox News Digital, this is before any of this news, these cases are not out of the ordinary. And while you're always looking at individuals who are closest to the victim, you also have to keep your eyes open. They're oftentimes random, he went on to say, and it appears that this is random. My question to you is, we in the media, me and you, we have to deliver content and stories, and we have to report. Sometimes we're not always the fairest to guys like the boyfriend, Richard Tobin, or even this guy, Michael Jabrowski, or whatever his name, Jabrowski, the guy who found the body, allegedly. Then we find out the stepdaughter was the one who found it. But a lot of people were questioning both of them. The people in the media and people in general have to be more careful about pointing fingers too early, do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it makes me think of the Olympic Park bombing too with Richard Jewell. I mean, that guy's life was destroyed. And it ended up being Eric Rudolph. They found out years later. But yeah, I think we all need to be very careful. I know we did a sidebar episode on this, our podcast last week with the sheriff, and we talked about the boyfriend. That seems to be it's statistically, and I obviously everybody else on the panel can speak to this more than I can, because they work in the trenches of homicide investigations. But I guess statistically speaking, I guess there may be a better phrase for that. It's a lot of times people are murdered by the people closest to them. But then we do have these frightening other cases that are random. So I think we do have to be really careful about that. And taking you back to Chandra Levy, I think just that created a frenzy. The fact that she had worked for a congressman and there was a relationship there, and people probably wanted it in some ways to be him, because it might make a better story. But you do have to be really careful, because people's lives can basically be ruined by these types of things.
And we are going, I don't want to ruin any lives myself. So we're going to start to wrap in a little bit, because I got to let Detective Ramos, Josh Ritter, Anjanette, and Scott get back to their, probably get back to going to sleep soon. Although it's a little early out in Vegas and LA for that. And Vegas is just it's lunchtime in Vegas right now.
It's our bedtime, Joel.
Yeah, I know. It's right. I'm ready for bed. Detective Ramos, is there truth to this point from L. Rose? I love the name. The hardest criminals, don't take offense, my beloved dog who passed away 17 years was Mabel Rose. The hardest criminals I've noticed to catch have always been transients moving across states or long-haul truckers. They're never in the same area for long. They were also talking in the chat about looking at homeless encampments. But what about this notion of, we don't know if he's a transient, but if he is, Detective Ramos, does that complicate it a lot more?
Sure it does. And she's on point. Long haul truckers, they're all over the place all year long, and they never stay in one place for very long at all, except when they're home. So that's why many times we find that the serial killers are people of that kind of employ. They are just never in the same place at the same time. I saw one comment that this guy's gone, and I agree with that. He probably didn't know about the footage in LA or the DNA profile in LA. I'm sure this is news to him that, oh crap, I've been identified in LA, so now I've been identified here. So I gotta get the hell out of here. So yeah, there's a certain amount of truth to that. People who don't stick around are harder to catch than people that do stick around. But my sense of it is, this guy, if he saw this press release, his shoes are on fire right now. He is getting the hell out of town.
What I love about Scott and Detective Ramos, they're so calm. They're like very meticulous in how they go about things. They don't get all hyper. We in the media, we get hyper sometimes. Shaquille O'Neal, he never gets hyper. He's had about 2 weeks to get a head start on Fling. That's a lot of time. It sure is. Scott Duffey, back to you, and I promise we're going to start to wrap in a few. A couple of more things I want to get to, though. Again, Joe Giacalone, he tweeted, and I mentioned this in yesterday's show, that if you were going to commit this attack, you'd have to have an escape route. And if you went in one direction, it was just into the wilderness, but the other direction from where this happened, and he looked at this all on Google Maps, there is like a cul-de-sac with homes. Our investigators right now going to each one of those ring cameras on those doors, if they're there, and cross-checking video against what they found in Los Angeles to see if they could spot this guy potentially leaving the trail.
I would be really surprised if that wasn't already done. So there's just like Cass, there's also the I think it's called Divert. It at least in our area, and I forget what the acronym stands for, but the feds love acronyms. But
get it together, Scott.
The Divert team is a larger departments have their own squads that do it, and then smaller departments you could even have an FBI resource come in and put a team together, and their job is to simply go out and flush all the cameras that exist, and they make a decision based upon an escape route, how far to go out, and they're looking for not only not only homes and businesses, but of course now a lot of cars are equipped, a lot of buses are equipped with cameras, and in some of my cases, and this is where you're reaching out to the public. Hey, if you were in an area at a particular date and time, check your GoPro cameras. Think of all the bikers, that have cameras on top of their helmets, and they're constantly recording. And you don't know what you have until all of a sudden somebody says, hey, there was a major crime at this time at this place. And if you happen to be in the area, please look at your cameras, and then if you think you have something, we'll come to you and download it. So there are teams out there that go and download, they flush all these systems out, and they have the capability, depending on what type of system it is, to get that to a system that it's going to become evidence. So I would be very surprised if it's not already completed.
This I had never heard of, but it'll be a real horrible law if it is true. And Josh Ritter, I'll put you on the spot. I'm sure you don't know because you don't practice law there, but Maryland has a law in place that would delay the use of genetic genealogy. Even if they submitted for it today, it would be 2 years before it could be done. Josh Ritter, are you aware of laws like this that exist in other states where you can't do genetic genealogy, and why? I guess it's a privacy issue.
I am not aware of a law. I know that each state is really starting to concern itself with this type of legislation, certainly as it relates to privacy. I have not heard about a law that would delay it for a matter of 2 years. But I think what this talks about is that, as much as we're all very enthusiastic about the use of DNA, especially genetic genealogy in forensics, in fighting crime and detecting suspects, a lot of people are also concerned about it, the invasion of privacy that, because lots of times the way that they're doing this, we saw this most recently and famously in the Koberger case, is that they're able to track it back to his family members and not him himself, a family member who, by the way, according to all accounts, is completely innocent and unaware of any of this. So you can imagine how that might be disturbing to a lot of people. But how do you weigh that against the idea that, look, they were able to find that horrible murderer out of Idaho, and now alleged, I should say, but all sides point towards, in the same thing here, that it is remarkable. And both Scott and Dr. Ramos have talked about this, just how remarkable it is that they're able to even give us this small bit of information, this videotape that we're looking at. And I do agree that I think someone's going to take a look at that and absolutely know who that is, even though we're looking at it and saying it doesn't give us much information. To a person who knows him, they're immediately going to spot him. And hopefully that person comes forward. But years ago, before CODIS had as much information as it does, this would simply be an unsolved mystery that the police would have no leads on. I mean, think about that. They've done a tremendous amount of work already, and what they've come down to is a random lucky hit off of CODIS that matched them to somebody in Los Angeles. Otherwise, they would have nothing at all to work on. They've already said, we have no clue where he is. They have no information other than this random lucky hit that they were able to get, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, thank God for innovations in science. We've had the people from Othram on. Maybe we'll get them back on here in the next couple of days to talk about this. Scott Duffey, let me put you a couple more quick things. I'm going to let you go, I promise. Tracy, have fun. New York cannot put the Long Island serial killer suspect Rex Sherman's DNA in CODIS. We're getting a little off track here, but have you heard this? This is the first I'm hearing about this. This is crazy.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of that. So I wonder what if there's a specific New York law that prevents that for some reason. And just like the other comment about Maryland's law, I don't know enough about these laws. But at the same time, if in fact they are true, this is where the FBI does get to leverage its resources. Where if there can be a federal nexus, for example, you have a transient who's crossing many states, so there could be a parallel federal investigation which is allowing, let's just say this Maryland law does exist and genealogy can't be done for some unknown reason. I can tell you that probably the FBI is well into using its genealogy experts to try to start putting together a profile to come up with who this individual is, because you definitely have a federal nexus from going from LA to Maryland.
By the way, Autumn Blaze, thank you for this super sticker. Thank you, Joel, and the most phenomenal panel. Yes, they are. Best guess. How you don't have 1 million subs is beyond me. Justice, look at that, right? The COE put this up. These are the best still photos we're going to get. This must be what Harford County Sheriff's, the Sheriff's Department, or office, I should say, just put out. So take a close look here, everyone. And COE, let's get that. If we can scroll the email across the bottom. Back to you, Detective Ramos. There was talk, and they took some heat for victim shaming because they said she was on multiple dating apps. She was at the gym frequently. Do they need, I assume your hunch is this wasn't like someone who stalked her on a dating app, but do they need to now look at these dating apps and go and look at gym surveillance video and see if it matches to the image we're looking at right now on the screen?
Yeah, they probably will do that, but it's terrible that people would resort to that sort of thing. There may or may not be something associated with her lifestyle that led to this, but why put that out there? Why blame the victim on something like this? It's very poor taste, and it tells you about something about the person that's doing that. But it would be a smart move to do that, but not to the point where they're saying, well, see, if you hadn't have been here, this wouldn't have happened. That's crap to even have that kind of mindset. And they've got a pretty good description, but now let's keep in mind too that this was 6 months ago. Maybe the guy grew his hair out by now, and he doesn't look like that. But it gives them a really good place to start. They probably already have looked at video surveillance, and I think Scott said, he would be very surprised if they hadn't done that. They probably started going to different houses the day they made that discovery and start checking. That's one of the first things that you want to do is start checking video, home surveillance, business surveillance, and stuff like that that are within the general area, to give you some kind of clue, at least to see how she got there, and was there anybody following her or anything like that. That's one of the very first things you do in cases like this.
And SGS Nation, it seems like they all studied under Scott Duffey and Detective Ramos. He has a gold chain on. They're looking at that. Suspect looks a little bow-legged, looking at his gait. Josh Ritter, what can you say? The guy always lends a hand. Brilliant mind, legal mind, 2015 Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year by the Association of Deputy District Attorneys. He's also the host of True Crime Daily. Check it out. Josh Ritter, going inside the mind of a defense attorney, which is a scary place to be sometimes. What are you taking away from what you learned tonight about this case?
I guess just the remarkable kind of police work that was done, the luck that they struck, and the fact that now there's far more to go on than what they had originally. That again, going back to this picture here, a lot of people are going to look at that and go, well, that's not much to work on. But I think it's far more than what they had. They have a general description. A lot of people have talked about this guy possibly being transient. I look at that haircut and it looks like a fresh haircut to me. So I think that says a lot. We talked about possible gang membership. I look at him, I don't see one tattoo on him. And I'm just kind of spitballing here, but this is a lot of information that you can get from just a couple of stills in a video. And already just even from the people adding comments tonight, just, noticing the fact that somebody said he's wearing a gold chain. Somebody else pointed out the fact that the door was closed by somebody inside. I mean, there's just so much information to get out of this. I just think it's a remarkable breakthrough for them and a stroke of good luck. And I hope they're able to solve this soon.
The COE brought this up because of me. I'm a huge MMA fan. I've been following I'm a little bit of, I don't know. My mom calls me a hollow head, but a huge UFC fan. Dude has cauliflower ears. He's an MMA fighter. I can't tell in that photo, but trust me, that's not a good thing, because then this guy would know how to, just take anyone down if he's a trained fighter, especially a woman who's 5'2", 107 pounds, soaking wet. So the guy looks like he's physically fit. The problem here to me is he looks so generic. He looks like a million people who could be out there. Someone who is not generic, Anjanette Levy. She's a correspondent and host for the Law and Crime Network. A cool job. She's covered high-profile cases, including Kyle Rittenhouse and disgraced Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. And Jeanette, you think you guys ramp up coverage of this now that we've got a killer on the loose? Where do you think you head with this story?
Yeah, I think we're certainly doing a story on the website tonight. I know that's going up if it's not already. And then I already kind of raised my hand and said I should do this story. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think that we have something to go with now. I feel like if the authorities had something to put, they would have put it out by now. If they had it. They said they just got this information last night. Mm-hmm. So this is a really recent development for them.
Yeah. Moan Bent looks like an MMA fighter type hairdo. Let's not scoop all MMA fighters into one category, but could be not a good thing if it is the case. A man who knows how to take people down, and he's going to teach me how to do this at CrimeCon, and I cannot wait. We're doing live shows. I might even do it live on the podcast, learn how to take down someone if they try to do anything to me. Agent Scott Duffey is the man who's going to teach me that. He's the director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute, handled bank robberies, fugitive task force cases, all kinds of crazy stuff. Prior to the FBI, he was a cop in the Commonwealth of PA, police officer for 5.5 years. Josh made a great point. No tattoos. That kind of eliminates, the thought that, let me bring Anjanette back in, that he might be, a gang member of some sort. Details. The devil's always in the details. But Scott Duffey, where does the investigation head from here? What are they doing tonight inside that office in Harford County?
Well, they're definitely going over everything that wasn't reported, and I feel pretty confident there is some really good information that they're already moving quickly and on both coasts. But at the same time, this press conference of a seemingly generic, individual. Yes, there's a lot to be taken from that, especially somebody who knows him. But you've also now just increased your tips coming in of everybody that will put in a name associated with somebody that looks like him, and they have to be dealt with. So that's going to increase the load, and I'm sure they're bringing plenty of outside help to help, prioritize what's a lookalike versus what's a possibility.
And if you didn't get enough of Scott tonight, he's coming back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time for Great Scott True Crime Phil, and we'll go over this. The evildoer, as his partner Phil Waters says, he's in court tomorrow, I think at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So we're going to examine that, and then we'll get back to this and get Detective Waters' take on let Scott sleep on it for the night. People are continuing to analyze the video. Joan Regan says, or Reagan, something yellow sticker sticking out of his pocket, possibly a flashlight. I heard someone else saying that. I'm sure police are zooming in and taking a super close look. Detective Phil Ramos, it's in his blood, so I know he's going to be following this case. He's a retired senior homicide detective, 35 years. The last 15 years were in homicide, 12 years undercover. Detective Ramos is coming on next week. We're going to record Surviving My Biggest Case with him. It's going to be a wild trip. He could probably pick one of a million that he's had. 3-time Officer of the Year award, a native Las Vegan, and a Harley driver. Detective Ramos, are they going to catch this guy, and what are they doing right now?
Yeah, they're going to catch him. There's a lot to go on. It just has to be filtered through all kinds of things that, process of elimination. But I'm absolutely certain they'll find out who this guy is because, like Scott just said, there's a certain amount of holdback there. They gave you just a little teaser about what they have, but that's, in my mind, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's more information that they have that they're working on. And that's exactly what they're doing right now.
And Detective Ramos, were you this chill and calm before retirement? When you were working cases, were you very deliberate like this, or are you excitable?
Yeah, I'm kind of laid back, but I'm that quiet guy in the corner that watches everything and just says something every once in a while.
Let me ask you something. When you go to, these are questions that I think about at night. When you go to a restaurant, I've asked other law enforcement officers this. Do you always sit in a corner where you can see everyone coming in and out?
Yeah, that's that's just habit. You do that when you're working, and yeah, we do describe what the person by the door was wearing and what that waiter had on his shirt, and yeah, powers of observation are what keep you alive.
Listen to that, everyone. That is some sage advice. The powers of observation is what keeps you alive, and that's why we're talking to Detective Ramos, and then we'll have that up, not as a live video, but again, police tonight in Harford County. I should say the sheriff there and deputies saying that they are looking for a male in his 20s, 5'9", 160 pounds, Hispanic background. They believe he acted alone. The sheriff, as Detective Phil Ramos just said, the sheriff, it's the colonel actually who said it, we will get the job done, and Detective Ramos believes that they will. We're right back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time with Scott Duffey and Phil Waters. Sunday night, very important note, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We are working on a show called Mahalo Maui, and anybody who purchases merchandise Sunday night during that show, all the proceeds will go to the victims of Maui. I'm going to invite Phil Waters on since he's on the Big Island. We've got someone from Direct Relief who's helping the victims there, trying to work on getting some reporters. We raised $2,000 in 2 hours last Friday with Phil and Scott, and we're going to try to equal that. But this time, you buy merchandise, we will send all that money to Maui. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Las Vegas. Love you, Los Angeles. Love you. Where are you, Anjanette? Somewhere in the Midwest.
The great state of Ohio, the Buckeye State.
The Buckeye State. Love you, Ohio. Yeah. Love you, PA, Delaware, UK, Australia, everywhere, and everywhere in between. Hang on, guys, 1 second.